Hey, what's up everybody? So in my teenage years, after exhausting the whole catalogs of the big four, I decided to give Exodus a try. I wanted to like them so badly, but something just didn't click with me.
Move this man!
Now as an adult, I'm revisiting this band from my youth, one that I feel is really underappreciated. Gary Holt, often dubbed the godfather of thrash, is a really interesting figure. He joined Exodus after learning guitar from Kirk Hammett, took over as the main songwriter and lead guitarist, and became the face of the band. Later, he would step into Slayer's lineup after Jeff Hanneman's passing. Despite his immense contributions to the genre, Holt and Exodus seem to be constantly overshadowed by the other metal giants. But what makes a band like Exodus, with a storied past and a thrash icon like Gary Holt, struggle to escape the shadows? Today we're diving into the riffs, the history, and the overlooked impact of Exodus, focusing in on some standout riffs from Gary Holt, and exploring why I think Exodus deserves more attention in the metal world. Exodus, one of the earliest thrash bands, formed in 1979 by Kirk Hammett and Tom Hunting, alongside Tim Agnello and Keith Stewart. It started as a cover band playing local backyard parties. Once Tim leaves, Gary Holt joins the band, becoming a pivotal member. Initially, Gary Holt would help Hammett set up his gear at these parties, and Kirk Hammett would teach Gary Holt how to play guitar. The first song he learned was some kind of Rolling Stones song, but he can't remember which one. Holt's entry into Exodus marked a turning point for the band. He became a constant for the band throughout their entire career. Soon after his addition into the band, Hammett met Paul Bailoff at another party, and that completed the initial lineup for the band. This iteration recorded a demo in 1982 featuring Whipping Queen, Death and Domination, and Warlord. Then in April of 1983, Kirk Hammett would leave Exodus to join Metallica, leaving Holt to take the reins. The new lineup was rounded out by Rick Hunolt on guitar and Rob McKillop on bass. By spring of 1984, Exodus recorded another demo at Turk Street Studios, with tracks that would later appear on their debut album. The metal underground would take notice of this, thanks to the thriving tape trading scene, which would lead them to their first record deal with Torrid Records. The band recorded their first album, Bonded by Blood, at Prairie Sun Recording Studios in the summer of 1984. However, due to budget constraints, a tape leak, and issues with the album artwork, it wasn't released until April 5th of 1985. Despite these hurdles, Bonded by Blood was a tremendous hit for the band, and they toured relentlessly supporting it. After the tour, Paul Bailoff was dismissed due to substance abuse issues, allegedly, and was replaced by Steve Zetro Souza. With Zetro, Exodus released two more albums, Pleasures of the Flesh in 1987, and Fabulous Disaster in 1989, both under Combat Records. Fabulous Disaster became a highlight for the band, reaching number 82 on the US Billboard 200, and the music video for Toxic Waltz would gain them a lot of fame because it was featured heavily on MTV's Headbangers Ball. The success from this third album would land them a record contract with Sony. In 1990, Exodus released their first album for Sony, Impact is Imminent, which should have been a high point for the band, but was received really poorly by critics. Gary Holt has often said that he wished that he could take this album back. I assume he feels they didn't do as well as they could have, and he said he's wanted to reuse some of those riffs because they're some of his favorite ones. The 90s was a very turbulent time for Exodus. They lost their original drummer Tom Hunting, who had to be replaced by John Tempesta, and Michael Butler would join the band on bass. In 1992, they released their second album for Sony, Force of Habit, which was a big switch up in sound for them, and as you could probably guess, it didn't perform very well for them.
It's definitely a no for me, dog.
And this led to a semi-hiatus for the band, who would play sporadic shows throughout the years. In 1997, Holt, Hunting, Hunolt, and Bailoff reunited for a few shows and a live CD, which unfortunately resulted in financial disputes. The band would remain largely inactive for a few years until 2001, when they would reunite to play a benefit show for Chuck Schuldiner and Chuck Billy for cancer treatment. This time their reunion would stick, but in 2002, they tragically lost Paul Bailoff, and Zetro would once again enter the band. In 2004, Exodus would make a powerful comeback with Tempo of the Damned, which saw them returning to their thrash roots. Despite limited commercial success, they thrived during the thrash revival scene and toured this album relentlessly. Zetro would once again leave the band to be replaced by Rob Dukes, under whom they released 3 studio albums and a re-recording of their first album. Then in 2014, Dukes left the band and Zetro re-entered the band for the last time. And with this final lineup, they've released 2 albums, and they're currently working on their 13th studio album. So literally in the middle of recording all these, there was another big update from Exodus. Zetro is once again out of the band, and Rob Dukes is again the vocalist. Literally happened like 3 days in me editing this video, so this is just a wild update, even for me. I'm just glad that it happened during the editing process of this video. So yeah, once again, Zetro's out, Rob Dukes is back in, and his vocals will be on the 13th album. Gary Holt's guitar tone is iconic, and is shaped by a mix of gear and technique. He primarily uses Marshall amps, including the JCM 800, the Marshall Jubilee, and the JVM 410H, but he's also used a PV Triple H, wow. but he's also used a PV XXX, most notably on the Shovel-Headed Kill Machine album. As for cabinets, he usually uses Marshall cabinets with V30 speakers. When it comes to guitars, Holt has a few different signature models with ESP, including a ton of Eclipse models, an Arrow, and even a V. Early on in his career, he relied on pieced-together strats, mainly out of necessity, and for pickups he often uses EMGs, to give that really nice active thrash tone that's still prevalent in the scene. What really sets him apart is the subtle details in his playing. He likes to have his guitar strings really high off the fretboard to really dig in and generate a lot of distortion through sheer intensity, and this allows him to not use a lot of distortion on his amps. Interestingly though, he uses a really light string gauge, so he can really bend the shit out of notes, and all of this adds up to his own unique sound. Holt's journey in developing his unique sound, marked by relentless practice and a determination to forge his own path, is both fascinating and inspiring. It's a quality I deeply admire, and one that I hope to emulate someday with my own music. Okay, so here's my guitar tone for this one. It's heavily inspired by Gary Holt, but not an exact copy. For my tone, I'm using the Nabrini MRH810, and I'm just using the stock amps in there. It has a Recto 412 with V30s in it. I have a really simple EQ on this one, as well as just a TSE 808 to really tighten up the tone. Track number 3 on Fabulous Disaster, Toxic Waltz, stands out as a blueprint for thrash metal. The opening riff kicks off with an energetic, palm-muted power chord sequence, a hallmark of thrash. It's an excellent starting point for beginners aiming to master Gary Holt's style, with the main challenge being the tempo. I felt this riff had to make the list. It's one of their earliest hits and one of their most iconic songs. From Tempo of the Damned, War is My Shepherd is another fan favorite. Unlike Toxic Waltz, this track starts with a more deliberate build-up before launching into aggressive palm-muted riffs that Gary Holt is known for. Again, I chose this riff because I felt like the intro was really iconic, with some parts really reminiscent of early Melodeath. I think it's a good testament to how Exodus has evolved over time. Off Persona Non Grata, Elitist shows that Exodus can still hang with the best of them. The intro riff, while simple, just a series of power chords, delivers a punch that's hard to ignore. Surprisingly, this riff extends for 17 bars without dragging the song down, a testament to its driving power. Despite the really cheesy lyrics, the track highlights how even now Gary Holt can still churn out amazing riffs, keeping Exodus relevant and intense for so many years. These riffs embody Exodus' journey throughout the years, showcasing their ability to evolve but also stay current with the thrash scene. Toxic Waltz represents the early days, a raw, energetic foundation for the band. War is My Shepherd represented their resurgence, blending familiar thrash elements with a more refined sound. Finally, Elitist demonstrates their longevity, proving that after decades they can still keep up the intensity and deliver really good songs and riffs. Together, these riffs represent a band that hasn't lost sight and still understands what makes Exodus work. Exodus has always been a cornerstone of the thrash scene, earning their place through relentless effort and determination. While they didn't achieve the mainstream success that their peers did, they still managed to break into the US Billboard 200 a few times in their career, which is really impressive because a lot of metal bands today can't reach those same heights. Their influence is undeniable, with bands like Cannibal Corpse, Fear Factory, Machine Head, Havoc, and Evil citing them as inspirations. Despite their importance to the metal genre, Exodus remains underrated. One factor that could be contributing to their underdog status is the delay of Bonded by Blood. The year-long wait to release the album put them behind the curve. By the time their debut dropped, Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax were all on their second albums, and Megadeth was releasing their first one. Competing with these releases, albums that have only grown in stature over time, was no easy task. This timing likely played a factor into why Exodus had such a hard time gaining traction in the mainstream, leaving them somewhat in the shadows as the Big Four forged on. I think another factor that impacted their popularity was their tumultuous time in the 90s. Exodus faced numerous challenges. They had a lot of lineup changes, they switched up the sound, and they had some poorly received albums. These struggles left the band in debt, and despite their efforts, they fell just short of the commercial breakthrough that could have propelled them to the heights of Metallica and Megadeth. It always felt like they were one step away from that pivotal success, but it never quite materialized. The music industry can be very unforgiving, and Exodus had to fight to gain the ground they had lost. Their perseverance, however, paid off in 2004, with the release of Tempo of the Damned, a triumphant return that had reignited their career. Without this comeback, it's hard to imagine Exodus still playing today. Thankfully, they were able to keep the thrash machine rolling, solidifying their legacy in the metal world. Nevertheless, Exodus's impact on the metal world is undeniable, a testament to the music they created. Much of this influence can be attributed to Gary Holt, often hailed as one of the greatest metal guitarists of all time. His distinctive tone, forged through his unique playing and gear setup, is really notoriously difficult to replicate. Known as a riff master, Gary Holt has delivered one amazing riff after another, helping define the thrash sound that countless bands have tried to emulate. Though many thrash bands have come and gone, a significant number of them bear traces of Exodus's influence. Their sound remains the gold standard of thrash. While Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax might have broader appeal and more commercial success, Exodus's contribution to the genre is invaluable. They set a benchmark that others have aspired to but rarely matched. Love them or hate them, Exodus's role in shaping thrash metal is essential. Without them, many of the bands that we love today wouldn't exist. So this video came from a spark of inspiration from a comment left on my end of year video. They were a band I haven't really thought about in years, but that comment had me revisiting some of their discography. And over the past few weeks, I've been deep diving them on Spotify to get a better sense of who they are as a band, and also trying to find songs I want to feature and riffs that I thought were really cool. Unfortunately though, Exodus music still just isn't for me. My biggest issue lies with their vocals. I have a lot of respect for Paul Bailoff and Zetro, and I know a lot of the metal scene loves them as well, but I cannot stand their nasally, almost whiny-ish metal vocal. It's just not for me, it's personal preference, and I understand if you guys like them, but for some reason I just don't. It just doesn't have that big impact that I expect from metal vocalists. The lyrics also feel really cliched to me. I don't know, just something about them, they're just too straightforward, I guess, just too goofy, too on-the-nose metal. But I get that was the time for most of it, and in their later years, I know it gets harder and harder to be inspired by the same things. I don't know, they just feel a little too cliched or goofy to me. But again, that's just my opinion. That said, Gary Holt's guitar work is phenomenal, and I can really see why he's an inspiration to a lot of people. I've now found a new admiration for him, and I'm really glad that he was able to step into Slayer's lineup and join a Big Four band because I think he deserves that recognition. Interestingly though, I did find Rob Duke's era of Exodus was probably the best fit for me. They're not going to enter into my regular rotation, but I think I could find myself coming back to some of these songs, especially the remake of their first album, because a lot of those riffs are really cool, but I just don't like Bailoff's vocals very much. And his vocals align a little more with Gary Holt's riffs. I think it's a lot tougher, it sounds a lot meaner. I don't know, just something about it just really draws me in. But from the outside looking in, I didn't even know that Rob Dukes was a vocalist. I did know about Paul Bailoff, and I did know they had a second vocalist. I didn't really know his name, but I didn't know they had a third vocalist at any time. So if I was going to give you one recommendation, I would check out the albums from Rob Duke's era if you're like me and vocals are a really big part of what you listen to music for. While I don't really like them all that much, I do understand they're an important part to the thrash scene, and I think they deserve more recognition than they've gotten over the years. And although it will never happen, like I said in my Big Four of Thrash video, I think they deserve to take Anthrax's spot. They've had a bigger impact, not so much a commercial success. I think they just left more of an impact than Anthrax has. To sum up my thoughts, Exodus might not be on repeat for me, but I do have a new, deeper appreciation for Gary Holt, and I found some Exodus albums I might even enjoy. If I had to give some song recommendations, A Lesson in Violence and Bonded by Blood from the Let There Be Blood album, which I know might be a little blasphemous, but it's the remake of their first album that I really liked. And as cheesy as it is, I think The Years of Death and Dying was a really cool song. And a lot of the stuff from Shovel-Headed Kill Machine. And then one song I forgot to put in there was Funeral Hymn. I think that's an amazing song, and it really showcases Rob Dukes' vocals. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you love Exodus as a band? What song's your favorite? Do you also find those vocals a little just too nasally for you? I want to hear you guys' opinion. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you like this video, I want you to check this one out right here. I did a whole video on the Big Four of Thrash. I analyzed all 4 bands in the Big Four and gave some recommendations on what I thought could be a good replacement for 1 or 2 of them. No, it's not a very serious video. I thought it was just really fun to make. It was a nice thought experiment. So if you enjoyed this one, I think you might enjoy that one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.